respects to the traditional owners of the land, both past and present, upon which this campus sits. I also want to thank Rabbi Ralph Kennedy for agreeing to be here with me. He's a great example of the importance of allies in any kind of work that we do to try and make change. And thanks to all of you for joining us. I wanted to start our discussion today with a story from the Talmud. Some of you might be familiar with it. It appears in the tractate of Purim, and it's about the sun and the moon. And it comes up in the context of a kind of biblical inconsistency, where in Genesis it says that there were two great lights created, referring to the sun and the moon. And then the very next verse after that, it says one great light and one small light. And so the rabbis, in their wisdom, every time there's a problem, a textual problem is just an opportunity for more creativity. And so a midrash is created from this. And the story goes like this. Basically, when the moon and the sun were created of equal strength, and the moon is kind of figured as feminine and the sun figured as masculine, then the moon said, how can there be two powers with one crown? And then God basically said, because of that, you're going to be reduced. And the moon was pretty devastated by this. And then God basically tried to appease the moon and said, but we'll reckon the months by you, that's Rosh Chodesh, that we reckon by the moon. We'll call, David and other people, we'll call them the small. And, God kept trying to appease the moon, and the moon wasn't to be appeased. And then finally, God said, every month you need to give a sacrifice on my behalf because of what I've done. But it's sort of left like that. And then we have some other sources that say, at the end of time, the light of the sun and the light of the moon will come back to be of equal standing. And I suppose this has really devastated me, this story. And because, I don't think any of us can wait till, the Mashiach or till the end of time for that, to reclaim that correct kind of equality, that correct deep, that deep parity. And I want to suggest that there's a different way that we can, interrupt that story and take it a different way. And it might be something like saying, honouring the moon for naming the deep challenge of what it means to share power. And that's, in a way, that's kind of how I come to this. Ever since I started learning Torah, I came from doing feminist politics, and I sort of came with Sheila Jeffries, my lesbian separatist, politics teacher on my shoulder. I came into the Beit Midrash, but it's not only the feminist theory that I learned, but also in my body I kind of felt what was kind of the pain of what had been women's experience over the years. But at the same time, I fell in love with Torah, and it's an ongoing love, and I had a deep knowing that there's room for the fullness of both men and women to take expression in a kind of committed halachic Jewish life. And so basically for me, Yeshivat Maharat, which I'll go on to say something about in a minute, that's the kind of fruition of that sense that I've always known, that it's possible for that, to women to really fully claim, their place in Jewish life, and also in Jewish life that's really held and framed by halakha. So Yeshivat Maharat is the first institution to train women as clergy for Orthodox communities, and it's giving institutional recognition to women as religious leaders. And what's so significant for this organisation to put women's leadership at the fore is that even other organisations, maybe in the liberal Jewish world, that might be egalitarian, you still find the different ways that kind of sexism sort of infiltrates. And so there's something about an organisation that is dedicated to putting women forth as religious leaders that's a very powerful contradiction against sexism. At the moment, so what the curriculum, in general it's a 4-year curriculum, and it's composed of rigorous curriculum of Talmud, of halakha, of training to kids psak, like halakhic decisions, and also pastoral counselling and internships. At the moment there are 17 women enrolled, and many of them a few of them are on campus. I think most of the new students who are starting this year are all going to be on campus in New York, but there are others who are situated around the US, and I'm in Jerusalem, and we video conference into the shiurim. Except for them it's kind of at 12 midday, and for me it's at 7 at night. Some of you might have heard of Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz. She's the Dean of Students, and she was the first woman to be kind of given the title of Rabbah, and that was by Rabbi Avi Weiss, and she served for I think at least about 8 years as clergy at the Hebrew Institute of Riverdale. They also call it the Beit. In Riverdale, New York. And so last year there were 3 more women ordained, and they get ordained. It caused a big hoo-ha when Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz was kind of called Rabbah, and so as a way to, I think, kind of try to deal with some of the tension that was created, the institutional title that's given is called Maharat, which stands for Manhiga Hilchatit Ruchanit Toranit, which is a kind of a leader of law and spirituality and Torah. But it's very clear that depending on whatever role that we're in, we can use the title that fits that role. And I think the whole naming, the kind of crises that came up around the naming, is related to just the interesting kind of role that Yeshivat Maharat plays, because they're working to create change in a community, but they can't go too far as to make themselves irrelevant to the community that they want to impact. So they're really kind of dancing a delicate dance. Just a few things of the limits of within an Orthodox framework what a Maharat can't do. For example, like not counting a minyan. Another thing is about, and related to not counting a minyan and understanding of different kind of obligations that a woman might have. Not that everyone holds that, but say that a mainstream acceptance of different obligations a woman might have means that she also doesn't lead as a shlichat tzibur. She doesn't lead aspects of prayer except things like Kabbalat Shabbat or Psukei de Zimra, which is mainly composed of psalms, etc., and is like a different level to other prayers. And the third thing is that she won't, or I won't, or we don't serve as witnesses. And even though women can serve as witnesses in certain, in certain situations, but that's kind of like a general limit. But yeah, okay, so I'll just put that out there. Now, I just wanted to say a few things before I hand over to Rabbi Ganendi. I wanted to just say a few things, and then we're planning to kind of open this up for questions, and happy to take it in whichever direction you want. I wanted to just share a few things about sexism, but before I do that, I'll just say for me, so I'm studying Yeshivat Maharat, and I'm due to graduate Bezrat Hashem next June in New York, and I got admitted with a few other women in a kind of advanced track for people that they acknowledged our prior learning and experience in leadership. And for me, doing this course feels like a culmination of a lot of different things that I've done in my life, but being a woman, it didn't kind of have a career path until now in the way that Yeshivat Maharat has offered. I wanted to say a few things about sexism and how ingrained it is, because I think something about putting women, as I said before, as leaders in this way, even with the limitations that I told you, it's still a very kind of challenging idea to sexism. And sexism's so ingrained, it's so hard to see. It's like wearing our own skin, and it's like so part of every aspect of our life. And I wanted to go through a few of the different levels of that. So the first level that I wanted to share with you is about internalised sexism, and that is how we minimise and trivialise things about our lives, about ourselves. And sometimes it's things like, oh, I'm not going to say that because it's obvious. There might be a million different people writing a million different things that could be within that category. But there are some people who let their voices be heard, and sometimes there are others of us who don't speak because we think what we're going to say is obvious. And it's just not true. But it's so deep, it's so ingrained, and it's very hard to interrupt.
I think that's more of a woman thing than a man thing.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think the minimising and trivialising, it's also got to do with, anyway, I'll just leave it there. I wanted to give you an example of that. Another thing, it's sort of about maybe, in my experience, about sort of judging and feeling ashamed for taking up space. And one example that happened for me is the first wedding that I conducted as a Messaderet Kiddushin. I also didn't realise that it was I knew it was important for what it was as a wedding, but I didn't think that it was kind of significant for me, probably as the first woman in an Orthodox setting to lead a marriage in Melbourne. And so I didn't really sort of gear myself up in the right way. And then after, everything went really well, but I was just like flooded by my own kind of self-judgment, and it was very, very challenging. And I don't know if I was just sensitive and picking up on negativity of people looking and wondering like what's going on here, because there's also that when we pick up what other people think. But I'm also happy to own it, that there's something about when you, I think, do new things, that it's like a bit of a fight inside. I can feel myself getting a bit emotional. Yeah, it's a fight kind of inside. So, and it feels important to own that, because then it's not just about like other people stopping us from doing things. It's also about like the fight that we have with ourselves about kind of taking risks and going beyond like what might feel comfortable. Another kind of manifestation of the internalised sexism is also about the way women kind of go against women. And one experience I had that was quite painful was when I first started, like quite close to when I first started learning Torah, but I like wanted to do more, and I was interested then to also kind of like follow the clergy role. And I contacted a woman rabbi, and she basically just said to me, "Oh, you're just putting your feet like in the water, or you're just touching the water or something." And it was, so I suppose I just felt like that was really dismissive, and I was kind of like felt a bit humiliated. And it was just interesting that came from another woman who was a rabbi when I kind of like went to her to express that was my desire. The third aspect I wanted to mention was about the blindness of men around gender dynamics. And I don't mean this in a blaming way. I think everyone's hurt by sexism. I think no one gets to be their full selves because of sexism. And so some examples, that in the same way in lots of other ways, it's hard to be aware of your own privilege because it's sort of painful. And if we really, and I know this, I live in Jerusalem. I move between Israel and and Palestinians territories. I flash my Australian passport. I can go wherever I go. I sit with the discomfort, of privilege, and it's hard not to do anything to make change when you feel your privilege so acutely. And part of the way that blindness manifests is by taking up a lot of space, by disregarding or belittling women's voice, by the focus on women's appearance. I'll also claim that that's something that's been internalised. Michael and I, beloved partner, we would like do community events together. And I just remember feeling like, why do I care more about, we're going to do the same thing, and why is like, it got different implications how I look than how he looks. And it,